basic. Right, yeah, so hello everybody. We are going to continue tonight with the comparative and superlative sentences. And we are going to practice a little bit, and then we're going to do a speaking practice also. We are going to do also a small review in case you missed last class or in case you forgot a few things about last class. Then I'm going to let you work in pairs to practice these structures and also to use them in conversation. That's my idea too. So as I said at last class, these structures are not so difficult because we already know them. We know the basics, we know how they work. So now what we are doing is just a review and trying to take them into another category, if you wish, like a more advanced structure. Because we're not only working with the basics, like comparing adjectives, we are also comparing adverbs, and we're adding more structures to the basic structure of the comparative and the superlative. So yeah, this is not only a review, but also an extent of what we've already learned in the past. So let me go to the slides that I want to share, which are the same as last class. Here they are. So I told you that, just in case, let's review. I told you that we started Unit 5 already. And in Unit 5, we are only going to work with comparatives and superlatives. So only one objective. And then we are going to move on to the next unit, which is one of my favorites. It's narrative tenses. All right, so yeah, this is, as I said, just a review. And now let's go back to the slides where we know that we are just going to be working on comparatives and superlatives. So we have the comparatives here. And what I told you about the comparatives, like the basic rules that we need to keep in mind, is that when we have short adjectives, usually only one syllable adjectives, what you need to do is to add ER to your comparative form. So bigger, thinner, cheaper, and older. So for example, my bedroom is bigger than my bathroom, for example. All right, so yeah, just comparing two elements using a short adjective, adding ER and the word than. So bigger than some. What else? We have adjectives ending in Y. When you have adjectives ending in Y, you need to drop the Y, leave it out, and add an IER. So things like funny becomes funnier in the comparative form, pretty becomes prettier. All right, so yeah, that's also an important thing to keep in mind. Adjectives ending in Y always take this format, even though they may have two syllables, right? Because we said adjectives with one syllable go with ER. But also two-syllable adjectives or more than two syllables ending in Y, then they are the exception and they need to go with IER. So funny, funnier, pretty, prettier, also healthy. We have healthier. Yeah, it is possible. Some people use more healthy, but yeah, it depends on each person really. But I would personally use healthier, I guess. We have the same idea with easy. So easy becomes easier and not more easy. So easy, easier. So yeah, that's the idea with adjectives ending in Y. Then we had a look at adjectives with two or more syllables, like long adjectives, if you wish. If you have long adjectives, then what you are going to need is to add another word, in this case, more. So if you have the adjective famous, it becomes more famous than. Important becomes more important than. Interesting, again, becomes more interesting than. Right, so long adjectives, two or more syllables usually, go with more instead of adding er at the end. And finally, last but not least, we have irregular comparatives. Let me go back. Irregular comparatives. So in these irregular comparatives, we have 3 now, which are good, bad, and far. So good becomes better, bad becomes worse, and far becomes bad. So instead of saying let's say maths is a more good subject than physics, that doesn't work. So we have to say maths, it's a better subject than physics. Okay, so when we are comparing two things, we need to use those words. Maths, it's a worse subject than physics. Right, so also my house is further than yours, for example. All right, so that's the way it works, and that's something you got to keep in mind. Yeah, so those are the basic rules. Those are things that those are the things where we start when talking about comparatives, right? 4 rules to form them. Of course, I told you last class that we are always going to use than after all of the comparatives, right? So we have one element, the comparative adjective, than, and another element. My bathroom is smaller than my bedroom, for example. Right? So than is mandatory when you have 2 elements to be compared. Eating chia is healthier than fried chicken. Yes, but it's chia delicious? I don't think so. Yeah, that's a good example. So yeah, healthier than. That's it. That's what we got to start with. And starting from this, we moved on to some other ways of making comparatives. We'll see those. Let me clear my board and continue a little further. All right, so what I told you is that we start by the basics like ER and that's it, but we have other ways of making comparatives. Now my slide is like full of things. I don't like it anymore. But yeah, these are the examples that we created last class. Maybe if I make it a little bigger, sorry, smaller, because it's a little messy. Yeah, okay. Maybe like this, it's not as full as it was. All right, so yeah, what do we have? We have equality, superiority, and inferiority. 3 ways of making comparisons. So what does this mean? Oh, sorry. Before going to that point, let me go back further or further. That's a good question. Yeah, let me mark them on the slides because yeah, I'm going to be able to show you. Yeah, so we have further. The first one, further. Yeah, that is like a physical distance. That's why I said my house is further away than yours. Yeah, it's a physical distance. Whereas when we speak of further with a U, we are talking about an abstract distance, if you wish. All right, so the first one would be related to physical distance, whereas further would be related to an emotional distance, an abstract distance. All right, it's just a matter of using them. Yeah, because they both refer to the distance between one thing and another. Right, so let me give you 2 examples. Maybe with examples, this is going to be easier. All right, so I said, let me copy the same example. My house is farther than your house. Farther, talking about, again, a physical distance. So farther from university than your house. Whereas, sorry, further it's talking about an emotional distance and a distance and abstract distance. For example, we're farther from finishing the project than the other class. Yeah, for example. All right, so it's not a physical thing, like finishing the project is not something that we can measure in kilometers or hours. It's something that is not a measurable thing in a physical way. All right, it could be physical in the meaning of, yeah, we could measure it by hours, but yeah, not quite. We can estimate or predict something, but it's not very measurable in real life. Or he was further went the time, for example. Yeah, the time is an abstract idea from talking when talking about love, happiness, etc. Abstract things, right? So it's not a physical thing. It's not something that we can measure, right? Whereas when we are talking about further with an A, we are talking about a physical thing always, all right? So that would be the difference between using one or the other. All right, so yeah, it's an important distinction that I didn't make last class, and I was forgetting to do it this class. So yeah, both of them anyway come from far. This word, right? So both of them come from far, but farther refers to a physical distance, whereas further refers to a more abstract distance. So yeah, you can see one or the other being used, and it depends on that. That's the criteria to decide. Yeah, also feelings, emotions, abstract ideas. So anything that we cannot really touch or measure, that would be it. Yes, that's something that it was interesting to look at. Now let's go back. Yeah, I was talking about different types of comparative sentences. We can make a comparative sentence of equality, superiority, and inferiority. In this slide, I was talking about superiority. Something is more something than another thing, right? So, for example, Jack's room is bigger than Larry's room. So it's bigger. Math is more interesting than physics. It's more something, right? It's superior, if you wish. Whereas when we talk about equality, we are talking about two things being on the same level. So Jake's room is as big as Larry's room. So both rooms are big enough, the same amount, if you wish, right? So they are on the same level. That's why we talk about equality here. Or maths is as interesting as physics, on the same level. Finally, we have inferiority. So something is less than another thing. So Jake's room is less big than Larry's room. So Larry's room is bigger and Jake's room is less big, right? So that's what we are talking about. Inferiority, equality, and superiority. That's it. What changes is the structure. So Remember that you are only going to change the adjective when talking about superiority. You are going to add er or more to your sentences. Whereas when you're talking about equality, you're not going to add er or more. You're just going to use the adjective as a plain thing, nothing extra. As big as interesting as. That's it. The same is going to happen with inferiority. You are not going to change the adjective. You use it plain. Big, less interesting. That's it. And of course, if you want to talk about the past, I told you this already, what changes is the verb, nothing else. So Jake's room is as big as Larry's room, equality and present. Jake's room was as big as Larry's room, the past. Of course, you can make them in any verb tense that you wish. But yeah, this time we are focusing only in the present, on the present, sorry, and on the past. That's it. So yeah, that's a review of the three different types of comparative sentences that we reviewed last class. Does anybody have any question or any comments about this type of comparative sentences? Yeah, so let's move on. We've got that. We reviewed some exercises during the class. We completed them. And another thing that we talked about, it's the plus comparatives. And we saw examples like the more space there is between your name and your last name, the more you wish to keep separate these two parts of your personality. Or the more eligible your signature is, the less assertive you probably are as a person. So you're using the, more, the, less, etc., plus the comparative. Also, we had a look at this. The sooner we start, the earlier we'll finish. That means that how soon we will finish depends on when we start. The sooner we start, the earlier we'll finish. Finally, the colder it is, the more clothes you need to wear to keep warm. So how many clothes you need to wear depends on how cold it is, right? So one thing depends on the other. That's the relationship between the plus the comparative. For examples, the more you study, the more you learn. The sooner we leave, the earlier we'll get there. The more time you have, the slower you will do things. The more in shape you are, the better you feel, right? So, for example, in the last sentence, how you feel depends on how in shape you are. I'm not sure if that's true, but that's the example that we created in class. All right, so one thing depends on the other. That's the fourth way in which we can make comparative sentences that we had a look at last class. It's, again, just another way of making comparatives. That's why I told you that we started from the basics, like adding ER or more. Then we took it a little further with equality, superiority, and inferiority. And now we take it a little further with the plus the comparative, right? So still on the same topic of comparatives. With this one, you don't need to, you don't have to forget that we are talking about two things, but one thing depends on the other. So that's an important relationship that you need to make when you want to make this kind of comparatives. And I told you that there is a regular saying in English, a saying that we usually use. It's the sooner the better, right? So it's using the same comparative, but we are keeping it short. The sooner the better, right? So it works with the same structure, but it is a little shorter. So here you can see like quite long examples, but it can be also a short thing. The sooner the better, the quicker the better, etc. So it is possible. is it possible to use fewer for inferiority comparisons? Let me see if I understand what you mean. Yeah, math is fewer interesting than physics. If you're asking me if I can replace less by fewer, nope, it is impossible. So the only possible option here is less. Of course, we can use fewer to make comparative sentences. So, for example, let me write it here. There are fewer oranges in my fridge today. So in that case, I'm making a comparative, but fewer in this case is the adjective. So it becomes an adjective and it's the one that is helping me to make the comparative sentence. But in that case, it's perfect. I can use it to talk about quantities. It's not a problem, fewer. But it is not possible to replace less by fewer. In that case, it doesn't make sense. So yeah. If that's your question, I think the answer is nope. It is not possible. Good. My bed is much bigger than yours. Using much is it correct? It is correct, definitely. Yeah, my bed is much bigger than yours. Yeah. All of the quantifiers are good here. Much bigger, so much bigger. Also, like using two intensifiers, sorry, it is possible. So much bigger, so much more fun. Yeah, I have heard that it's so much more fun. Yes, it is possible to intensify those words by adding intensifiers. Good. Yeah, so that was the last comparative that we studied. Any other question or comment before we continue? Check. Yeah, I answered the questions on the chat. Yeah, we're good then. Then we started with superlatives. And yeah, superlatives are used to name like the best in quality among some things. So in comparatives, we are talking about two elements. This is better than this one, for example. But in superlatives, we are not comparing two things. We are talking about the best among the rest. Okay, that's the idea. So how do superlatives work? Very similarly to comparatives. So we have adjectives ending in one syllable, or with one syllable, sorry. We are going to use est at the end. So in the comparative form, we said bigger. My bedroom is bigger than my bathroom. Here I can say that my bedroom is the biggest room I have in my house, for example. Right? So it's the biggest one among the rest. Yeah, so adding est for short adjectives. Big becomes the biggest, thin becomes the thinnest, cheap becomes the cheapest, and old becomes the oldest. That's it. Then we have adjectives ending in y, and again, following the rule, you have to drop the y and you have to add ist. So funny becomes the funniest, pretty becomes the prettiest, easy becomes the easiest, etc. So yeah, that's how it works. Then we have adjectives with two or more syllables, like long adjectives, if you wish. So famous becomes the most famous, important becomes the most important, and interesting becomes the most interesting. Right? So instead of using more in the superlative, we are going to use most, the most famous, the most important, and the most interesting. And finally, we have irregular comparatives, which follow the same rule. So good, bad, and far. Good becomes the best, bad becomes the worst, and far becomes the farthest. It happens the same with an A or a U, the furthest. That's it. What's mandatory in the superlative sentences is using the. So the biggest, the funniest, the most famous, the best, etc. The something, it's mandatory. Again, since you are not comparing two things, you don't need to mention two things. My room is the biggest in my house. That's it. I don't need to say my room is the biggest between the living room, the kitchen. Now I don't need to mention anything else. The biggest, that's it. The best, that's it. All right, so yeah, with superlatives, it's also kind of easy because we have kind of the same rule that we have for the comparative. There's a small change here, and that would be it. And regarding superlatives, I think we left it there. Like we didn't check many different types of superlatives as we did with the comparative sentences. We only reviewed comparatives also using the prepositions of or in, depending on what we mean. So for example, it's a very good room. It's the best in the hotel, like inside this building. And it's a very cheap restaurant. It's the cheapest in the town or in town. It was a very happy day. It was the happiest of my life. So using in or of, depending on the context. That's what we did. And we also completed another exercise, which was this one. Using the superlative with the present perfect. So we read situations and we used the superlatives. For example, you've just been to the cinema, the movie was extremely boring, and you tell your friend, that's the most boring movie that I've ever seen. All right, so I am using the present perfect here. It's a very common way in which we can use the superlative form, like with the present perfect to mention that that's the best experience, that's the worst experience that I've ever had, to give some emphasis. So that's the funniest joke I've ever heard, perfectly possible. Or this is the best coffee that I've ever tasted. All right, so talking about verb tenses, it is also possible to say that superlatives can be used in any tense, especially in the present, especially in the past, especially in the present perfect. And that's it. We closed up last class with this exercise, and I told you that today we were going to practice. Do we have any questions about superlatives or any comments? No comments, no questions? That means only one thing. It means that we can practice. Oh, Nicole, tell us.
Hi, Valeria. In
Hey.
the last sentence, we can erase the word that. This is the best coffee I ever tasted.
Yes, perfectly correct. Yes, it is possible and it's more common. When we are speaking, we normally don't use that. Yes.
Okay, thank
Good.
you.
Mm-hmm. This is the best coffee I've ever tasted. Don't forget to pronounce the last syllable here, tasted, because we have a T here. So when you have a T or a D, the E needs to be pronounced. So tasted, that's the pronunciation. Yeah, good. It is perfectly possible to leave that out. All right, any other question, comment, complaint maybe? Good. As I said, this only means that we are ready to practice. So what we are going to do, I want you to practice like filling in exercises, closed exercises, to check the grammar to see if you can use it. But I also want you to practice your speaking. That's my my goal. If you can use comparatives and superlatives in speaking, I'll be the happiest teacher ever. So what we are going to do is complete sentences exercises regarding this structure. So the first exercise is about comparative sentences. And yeah, I just listed a few things and you need to write down the sentences. Okay, so for example, you have a bus and a car. Please use all of the comparative ways that we have. Don't use only one. So I showed you 4. I'm expecting examples for 4 of them. Okay, I don't mean that you need to write 4 examples for each category. All right, I don't mean that. But for example, here you can use superiority in number 1. In the second one, you can use inferiority. In the third one, you can use similarity. No, what was the other one? Oh my gosh, I forgot. Oh, equality. And in number 4, you can use the plus superlative, and so on and so far. All right, so try to use all of them in order to put them into practice. Of course, they need to make sense, so also you need to check that. Another exercise that we have is, sorry, let me move. It's superlatives, all right? So I just have 4 more situations and then superlatives using Eva. That's it. What do I have on the next one? It's superlatives and comparatives. So here you need to choose the best option. Regarding the context, so you need to decide whether this sentence needs to be a comparative one or a superlative one. Depends on the context again. And finally, we have speaking. I don't know why my numbers are all incorrect. I don't get it. But yeah, the important thing is that you can ask each other questions. Now it's fixed. Okay. Yeah, I want you to practice speaking by combining comparatives and superlative adjectives. All right, so that's the idea. I'm hoping that we can get there soon. As always, with this platform, I'm going to share the link and you need to get there. It's going to work the same as always. So you need to, if you are in room 1 on Zoom, please use slide 1 and so on and so far. All right, so let me share the link for everybody. Now let me give you permission to share your screen. And finally, let me make up the breakout rooms. Do we have questions before we move on to the small rooms? Any comments? We don't? All right. Yeah, that's it. So let's practice and let's speak. I'm going to be visiting you and yeah, I'm hoping that I can hear you all speaking. Let's get there. Let me create the rooms. And off we go. Let me know if you have trouble going to the small rooms, please. I think now we are all back. And yeah, I have a question for you about the questions that I shared with you for speaking. Let me move this so the numbers are correct. Okay, so it's related to question 11 here. So it says, which job is more gratifying? My question is, what is the difference between what and which? Does anybody remember? We talked about this.
Which is when we have options.
Yes, very good. And what about what? What is for the opposite? Like no options. It's general, if you wish. Yeah, so when I ask which job is the most gratifying, where are the options? Who knows? Because if I am using which, it's because I gave you options. If I didn't give you options, I wouldn't be using which. So where are the options here?
Maybe all kinds of
Math
jobs.
and
We can
engineering.
choose.
There we go. A
We
nurse.
can choose.
You cannot choose because, yeah, the options need to be very clear. All right. And yeah, I was expecting this to happen. So yeah, I did it with my dark intentions because I wrote this question and then I said, well, we are going to see if people remember that which is for when you have options. So yeah, when I was listening to the people who got to this part, they were speaking. And when they got to question 11, they started looking for any options like teaching or whatever they think is gratifying. But the options were nurse and engineer. Of course, it's not a problem if you didn't do it that way. You were still practicing, but yeah, keep it in mind. When you have which, is because your options are clear. If you don't see the options right in the question, maybe they are in some other question, but the options need to be clear. If I didn't want to give you options, I wouldn't have used which, and I would have used what, because I want to see among all of the jobs in the world, what is the most gratifying. But because I used which, I wanted you to use one of those options, nurse or engineer. All right, so yeah, keep it in mind because that's an important thing to know when it comes to using the language. Now, I didn't have the time to check all of the answers because yeah, these exercises were a little bit more challenging, so I had to be all over the place. And I also was listening to people speaking, so I'm going to check the exercises right after the class. Next class, I would like you to go back to Miro and check all the answers that you got incorrect and correct your mistakes, because I think that correcting mistakes, it's also a huge part of learning. So yeah, we're going to be checking up the exercises next class. Although I'm going to share the link on the WhatsApp group. So if you want to check them before the class, that's okay. It's not a problem. What else? I think that with this topic, we have already covered all that you need to know about comparatives and superlatives. Maybe next class we're going to do one more exercise about it, and then we're going to move on to the next objective. Also, I know that I promised Alejandra that we are going to talk about possessives. I haven't forgotten, but I forgot before starting comparatives, and I didn't want to use possessives right in the middle of comparatives. So now that we have finished comparatives and superlatives, next class we are going to talk about possessives, like all the types of possessive adjectives, pronouns, and etc. that you can use in English. So that's going to happen next class. We're going to finish up with superlatives and comparatives, and we're also going to continue with another objective. And just a little reminder, well, on CI, I have shared all of the exams and things that we are going to evaluate this course. And at the beginning of the course, I told you that we are going to have a final project by the end of the course. So we're not going to have a final exam, but we're going to have a final project. Does anybody remember what that project is? Have you all completely forgotten?
To write
Yes.
an essay.
There you go. Yes, to write an essay. So we are going to start that also next class. Why? Because I don't want you to be writing the essay one night before giving me the essay. All right, so we are going to focus on the essay. I'm going to give you outlines. So each class we're going to be talking about the essay a little bit so you can start writing and thinking about it right away. If there is a topic that you like very much and you want to write about it, you may, all right? I'm not going to choose your topic. It's your decision to make. But what I'm going to be doing is guiding you through the essay, because by the end of the course, that's to say the first week of June, if I'm not mistaken, you have to give me the essay, like the written one, but also I am expecting you to record a video essay to explain your essay with your own words. Of course, you have written it, so you know what it is about, but it's going to be a part of the speaking evaluation. So I'm expecting you to do both, write and record a video. So that's why we need to start right away, because otherwise it's going to be a lot of work for the last week of the course, and I don't want to overwhelm you more than this is already overwhelming. Maria Elena, tell me.
Please, the essay, how many page that it was?
We are going to talk about that next class. I'm going to give you all the guidelines. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to write a book. It's not my idea. I usually, just to tell you this so you can sleep well tonight, I don't usually tell my students I need 2 pages, 3 pages, 100 pages. That's not my style. It's your decision to make also. Of course, if you think that a page is enough and that you can write the best essay with all the structures in one page, I respect your decision. Of course, I'm going to give you a checklist, and if it doesn't meet the criteria, then we'll have a problem. But yeah, my idea is not quantity. Like if you write 3 pages and they are excellent, it's a good job. And if you write 10, that's perfectly correct. So yeah, just to tell you this, it's your decision to make. I'm going to give you the checklist, so you need to meet all the criteria. If you meet all the criteria with 3 pages, 2 pages, that's perfect for me. Yeah, but we are going to talk about that more deeply next class. So be ready. Please don't miss it, because it's an important thing to start doing. So yeah, we don't get stuck and we don't have trouble by the beginning of June. Yeah, that's what I want to say. So thank you very much for coming. Be aware that I'm going to be checking the exercises on Miro, and I will be seeing you next class. Thank you very much.
Valeria, can I talk to you, please?
Yeah, of course. If you have extra questions, stay with me. Don't worry.